I published the transcriptions of a secret meeting that CDC had conducted in 2001 called Simpsonwood, when they realized that the vaccination program was linked to the epidemic of autism. Congress said to EPA, tell us what year this epidemic started, and EPA came back and said it's a red line, 1989.
Is there anything in particular that's in the media about you that you want to address?
I don't know. I mean, I think the biggest sort of constant thing about me is that is my beliefs about vaccines. And if you ask any questions about vaccines, particularly during COVID, you were marginalized and vilified. You were gaslighted. People who were injured and who publicly said they were injured were gaslighted. They were told, no, you weren't. You're lying. Doctors, scientists who tried to explore alternatives to the prevailing to the received orthodoxy. Their careers were destroyed. They lost their insurance policies, their hospital affiliations, their university affiliations, and they were vilified. And so I've been going through this since 2005, when I published in Rolling Stone an article about a meeting. I published the transcriptions of a secret meeting that CDC had conducted in 2001 called Simpsonwood, when they realized that the vaccination program was linked to the epidemic of autism. And they had done an internal study of the largest medical database called the Vaccine Safety Data Link. And CDC brought in a Belgian biostatistician and epidemiologist called Thomas Verstraeten. And he had to look at the thing that they looked at. This database is the top, it's all the patients of the top HMOs and the 10 top HMOs. So it has millions of patients in it. And it has all of their vaccine records, but it also has all their subsequent medical claims. So you can do a cluster analysis and you can see, if he got the DTP vaccine here, is he more likely to be buying insulin syringes for diabetes 5 years later? So it's a really good tool of figuring out causal links between certain exposures and, later medical claims. And they looked at kids who they were suspected at that time, that the CDC suspected internally, at the vaccine program. They had gone from the 3 vaccines that I took as a kid to 72 vaccines. And all of a sudden, you had epidemics of all these chronic diseases. So food allergies suddenly appeared around 1989. Peanut allergies, stuff that, I never heard of anybody who had this stuff as a kid. All these neurological disorders, ADD, ADHD, speech delay, language delay, tics, Tourette syndrome, narcolepsy, ASD, autism. Autism went from 1 in 10,000 for 2,500, 1 in 2,500 to 1 in 10,000, depending on the studies. In my generation, a 70-year-old man, the amount of autism, full-blown autism in people my age, I literally have never met anybody my age with full-blown autism. And today, it's 1 in every 10,000 of us.
Do you think...
But with my kids, it's 1 in every 22 boys, 1 in every 34 kids. Something happened. And Congress directed to EPA. Congress said to EPA, tell us what year this epidemic started. And EPA came back and said it's a red line, 1989. So, there's a number of things that happened in 1989. But it's those diseases, all these autoimmune diseases suddenly appeared. I never knew anybody with juvenile diabetes. When I was a kid, a typical pediatrician would see one case of juvenile diabetes in his career. Today, 1 out of every 3 kids who walk through his office door has it. Something happened. Why isn't anybody talking about this? Rheumatoid arthritis suddenly exploded, lupus, all these autoimmune diseases, Crohn's disease, these exotic diseases. Nobody ever heard of when I was a kid. Now they're everywhere. And so you have allergic diseases, you have neurological diseases and autoimmune diseases, and obesity suddenly appear around 1989. And so there's a number of things that could be blamed for it. Well, the CDC thought it may be the vaccine schedule. Let's check. So they looked at one vaccine, which is the hepatitis B vaccine. They looked at kids who had gotten it in the first 30 days, and then they looked at kids who had not gotten it in 30 days. In other words, kids who got it later or didn't get it at all. And they compared these two groups. And among the kids who got it in the first 30 days, there was I think it was a 10,000% increased risk for a later subsequent autism diagnosis if you got in the first 30 days.
Wow.
So they immediately knew what was causing it. Oh, I know it was 11.35, so it's 1,135% increased risk. And so they knew immediately, it's called a relative risk of 11.35. If you have a relative risk of 2, causation is presumed. This was 11.35. The link between smoking a pack of cigarettes a day for 20 years and getting lung cancer is a relative risk of 10. This was 11.35. So they knew what it was. And then they had an emergency meeting that they called. They didn't want to do it on CDC campus because they thought it would be susceptible to freedom of information requests. So they did it in this remote retreat center called Simpsonwood, which is a Methodist retreat center on the wooded banks of the Chattahoochee River in a remote part of Georgia. And they had all of the big pangerums from the vaccine industry, from the pharmaceutical industry, from the universities, who are the ones who test the vaccines, from NIH, CDC, FDA, the World Health Organization, the European Medicals Agency, and they all got together for 2 days to talk about this study. The first day, and somebody made a transcript of it. And that transcript was given to me. And I published excerpts from it. But the first day, they're all talking about, oh my God, the lawyers are going to come after us. Nobody can deny this. This is bulletproof. There's no way to argue with this. This is real science. We can't, what are we going to do? The second day, they spent talking about how to hide it from the American public. And I published these things. Oh, then, I took a lot of heat at that point. But I was like, I'm not against vaccines. I vaccinated all my kids. I was fully vaccinated. I just think they ought to be tested, and we ought to know what the risks are and what the outcomes are. And there are people who are injured by vaccines. There's no question of that. There's a vaccine court that pays them off. It's paid off billions of dollars to people who have died or severely injured. And what I think we should do is not tell those people they don't exist, but we ought to acknowledge it, and we ought to be doing the studies to reduce the number of people. Oh, I don't want to take away people's if somebody wants to get vaccinated, they should be able to get it. But they also ought to know everything there is, what the risks are and what the benefits are. But if you say that, something that's completely reasonable, you're called an anti-vaxxer, and you're marginalized and silenced and vilified and made to look like, you've committed this kind of heresy that is dangerous for the whole society. That's what they did.
Yeah, ever since 2020, it's the
Yeah.
the confidence that the people have in government is just diminished at a.
Yeah, well,
I've never seen
you've never seen what?
distrust happen so fast.
No, because people could see what was actually evident for a long time, but everything became amplified during COVID. I also think people shouldn't be forced to get a vaccine. And if you really think about it, most Americans don't think that either. For example, right now, CDC is recommending a 9th booster.
A 9th?
Ninth. Okay, so it's recommended that everybody get their 9th booster. There's fewer than 10% of Americans who are getting it. So 90% of Americans have lost faith in CDC. Do you think that, we should do what the Biden administration did, which is to tell everybody, if you don't get that 9th booster, you can't work. You should be publicly shamed. You shouldn't be able to fly on an airplane. You shouldn't be able to walk into a public building. Your rights should be curtailed. You shouldn't be able to play professional sports. Does anybody think that we should be doing that? I don't think most Americans believe that people should be compelled to get a 9th vaccine, and which means that they don't trust CDC anymore.
No matter where you're watching Shawn Ryan Show from, if you get anything out of this, please like, comment, subscribe, and most importantly, share this everywhere you possibly can. And if you're feeling extra generous, please leave us a review on Apple and Spotify podcasts.